Ladies and gentlemen, Morgan State University is highly privileged and exceptionally honored this morning to have as our commencement speaker one of this nation's most passionate public servants, a longtime advocate for civil rights, equal access to affordable health care and quality education. He is a staunch defender of the environment, and of course, he's one of our dedicated members of the Morgan State University Board of Regents, the Honorable Elijah Cummings. A native and current resident of Baltimore, Maryland, Congressman Cummings has proudly represented Maryland's 7th Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives since 1996. He obtained his bachelor's degree in political science from Howard University, serving as student government president and graduating Phi Beta Kappa. He then went on to earn a law degree from the University of Maryland School of Law. He then practiced law for nearly 2 decades before the lure of public servant became too strong for him to ignore. Congressman Cummings began his illustrious career in the Maryland House of Delegates, where he served for 14 years and became the first African American in Maryland history to be named Speaker Pro Tem. Congressman Cummings currently serves as chairman of the Committee on Oversight and Reform, which is the main investigative committee in the House of Representatives. This committee has oversight and jurisdiction to investigate any federal program and any matter with federal policy implications. And as its chairman, Congressman Cummings is undaunted, as we have seen of late, in his efforts to hold all areas of the federal government to the highest standards of excellence and accountability. He has spearheaded congressional efforts to enact reforms that prevent waste and fraud and abuse and that ensure that government programs actually meet the needs of the American people. Congressman Cummings is also a senior member of the House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure, serving on both the Subcommittee on Coast Guard and Maritime Transportation and the Subcommittee on Railroads, Pipelines, and Hazardous Materials. In this role, he helps oversee the critical overhaul of the nation's infrastructure, the literal arteries of our commerce, communication, energy production, and security. He is a fervent believer that the current generation, your generation, has a responsibility to secure the future of the rising generation. He devotes much of his time to numerous boards and commissions with a focus on education when he's not in Washington advocating on behalf of the American people. You, of course, already know of his stellar service as a member of our board, but when he's not on campus pursuing our beloved Morgan and our mission and encouraging us to be even better than we have always been, he also chairs the New Era Academy Maritime Advisory Board. He sits on the U.S. Naval Academy Board of Visitors, the University of Maryland Law Board of Visitors, the Seed School of Maryland Board of Directors, and he is an honorary member of the KIPP Baltimore Schools and the Baltimore Schools for the Art. Congressman Elijah Cummings is busy. On behalf of all of us in Baltimore, all of us in Maryland, all of us across this wonderful nation of ours. And so, ladies and gentlemen, please join me this morning in giving a rousing Morgan State University welcome to our commencement speaker, one of Baltimore's favorite sons, the Honorable Elijah E. Cummings.
To Dr. Wilson, I want to thank you for your very kind introduction. And good morning to everyone. I'm certainly honored to be with you on this wonderful occasion. I must say that as I was sitting there listening to my good friend, mentor, and colleague, Kwesi Mfume, I could not help but think about the campus as it was maybe 15 years ago or so, and think about how far we have come. And I am so proud to be associated with Morgan State University. It is one of the proudest things I do, sitting on this board. Give yourselves a hand, please. We've done great. And so to Dr. Anna McFadder, Chairman Mfume, and my distinguished colleagues on the Board of Regents of this great university, I thank you for inviting me here today. And my thanks to you as well, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us here at Morgan State University for a brief conversation about the future of our graduates and the future of our country. I'm also very pleased to be joined by my wife, Dr. Maya Rockymore Cummings, and many of my family members who are here today. My friends, I think that you will agree that there's something inspiring and life-affirming about standing here among women and men who have completed one difficult journey in their lives and are about to embark upon another. Ladies and gentlemen, they started something and they finished it. Go on, you give yourselves a hand. We know from our study of ecology that life flourishes most at the crossroads where two diverse ecosystems meet. Graduation days are also crossroads, where those whom we acknowledge and honor are also challenged, both by your recognition and by the life choices that they are now called upon to make. I would add that this year especially, our graduates will be embarking on lives of accomplishment. But at the same time, our nation is also at a critical crossroads. In the words of former President Barack Obama, we Americans must decide what kind of nation we want our country to be. And then we must go about the business of shaping our destiny. Ladies and gentlemen, I will offer some thoughts this morning about these challenges and about our ability to overcome them. As is appropriate on graduation day, I will speak first to our graduates about the true value of the obstacles they have overcome and will overcome in their lives. Hopefully, all here this morning will gain some small benefit from my experience in this regard. Then, having spoken to those who are a strong and resilient people, I will expand those thoughts to the challenges that we all must confront and overcome as citizens of this great nation. Graduates, before I begin, allow me to join you in giving some credit where credit is due. We seldom achieve anything meaningful in life by our own efforts alone. So graduates, please join me in first thanking your God, thanking your families, thanking your friends, thanking your professors. Thank you for the cleaning lady and the janitor, all of them, and all the other people who have stood by you and helped you to reach this graduation stage. And parents, just a little footnote. I know you've been tired of lending money to your students. Well, I would not expect it to come too soon. I'm still trying to collect from my 36-year-old. You have sacrificed for it, graduates. You prayed for it. You stayed up late for it. Some of you have even fallen down while pursuing it. But thank God, graduates, that when you fell down, you dusted yourselves off and got back up. So therefore, you are justified in taking pride in all that you have accomplished. And I thank you for something else. Thank you for allowing your aspirations to inspire all of us. Now, as I promised, I'll take a few moments explaining why I believe that the obstacles that you have overcome in life are so important. So often people curse their lives, curse the difficult things that they're going through, but they do not realize that in those difficult moments are often blessings. Come on now. That's why I said to Michael Cohen, when bad things happen to you, don't ask the question of why did it happen to me? Ask the question of why did it happen for me? To do so, I must briefly share a childhood experience that helps to illustrate what I'm sharing with you this morning. I spent my earliest years in a small rented row house in South Baltimore. We lived in an area near Fort McHenry. You know the place, where the Star-Spangled Banner still waves. And like all American children, I recited the pledge to the flag every morning. I must tell you, however, that I had to question whether those inspiring words, liberty and justice for all, included little Elijah. Our poorly equipped 10-room elementary school did not have a lunchroom, an auditorium, a gymnasium, and it had a little tiny playground. And I was trying to learn in what was then called the third group. Today we would call it special ed. One day in the 6th grade, a school counselor asked me what I wanted to become in life. I had been inspired by a lawyer from the local NAACP named Juanita Jackson Mitchell. She had stood up for us little children in South Baltimore, where we had marched to integrate the Riverside swimming pool not far from our homes. So I told the counselor I wanted to be a lawyer. I dreamed of becoming a lawyer so that I could go out and help people. I must tell you, though, that the counselor looked at me and said, "You poor kid." He said, "You will never be a lawyer." And I want to make it clear, he was my color, all right? Let's be clear on that. But he then said something to me, Chairman Nfume, that has haunted me all my life. He said, "Who do you think you are? How dare you think that you can become a lawyer? Your mama, 4th grade education, daddy, 4th grade education, former sharecroppers, living in a 3-room house, 7 brothers and sisters. How you think you're going to do that?" Young people, I must tell you, I almost lost my faith that day. But I went home to a mother who did not have a PhD in education, but she had a PhD in faith. And others, teachers like a fellow named Hollis Posey, who's now dead. They believed in my potential and taught to my strengths. They saw things in me, Mr. President, that I didn't even see in myself. Our recreation leader, Captain Jim Smith, took me under his arm. Our local pharmacist, Dr. Albert Friedman, gave me a little job filling prescriptions without a license at 14. Amen. I can fill some pills now. I was good. I didn't know what they did for you, but I knew I could fill them. So together with my parents, these wise and caring adults lifted me up by the strength of their example. They took my big dream and made it their own. So I kept working hard. The day finally came when I made it out of the third group. Went on to get this Phi Beta Kappa Key. When they told me at Howard I made Phi Beta Kappa, I didn't even know what they were talking about. I said, I didn't pledge for no fraternity. What you talking about? Come to find out, one of the highest honor societies in the world. And after 14 years in the Maryland legislature, I was elected by my neighbors to represent them in the Congress of the United States of America, following the distinguished service of Kwesi Mfume. As a result, ladies and gentlemen, I am honored and privileged to stand before you on this wonderful occasion. Because of this, I'm privileged to stand here and remind you of a very important truth. Listen up. You, each and every one of you, are better and more valuable to our country because of the obstacles that you have faced and overcome. Everything that has happened to you up until this moment, good, bad, and ugly, prepares you for this moment. To illustrate what I'm sharing with you now, I want you to know that back when I first went to Congress, they put me in leadership after about a year, and I would sit there and wonder what I had to contribute. I asked the question, what would a little fellow who grew up in South Baltimore have to contribute to all these people that I'd seen on television? What would he have to contribute? The one who had graduated from the HBCU. And then one day they were talking about special education in our leadership meeting. And a little voice came and said, Elijah, it's time for you to say something. And I said to myself, I don't have anything to contribute. I've had a rough life. They don't want to hear what I got to say. And the next thing you know, the little voice said, you better get up. You're the only expert in here. You're the only one who ever been in special ed. Amen. So I got up and I began to talk about my experience in special ed. I talked about the pain. I talked about the frustration. I talked about the victory. And on that day, that little committee began to put together some things that gave us more funding for special ed. I am saying to our graduates, never forget the bridge that brought you over. Never forget. So now, graduates, I've shared this personal story with you. And by the way, let me give you a footnote. My first client, one of my first clients, when I became a lawyer, was a counselor who had told me I'd never be a lawyer. That leads me to another point. Do not let anybody define you. You must define yourselves. So now, graduates, I shared this personal story, and I want you to appreciate your human potential. You're not hearing this from someone who grew up with a silver spoon. Nah, I am no silver spoon. I didn't even have a plastic one. They do make some nice plastic spoons now, you notice? You're hearing this from someone who grew up in adversity. And therein is the potential value in the trials that you yourselves have overcome. From my own life and from my service on this distinguished Morgan State Board of Regents, I know that many of you have struggled. I know you have struggled to obtain your education. I know that many of you are the first in your generation to get a college degree. I know that despite our efforts, and we do work hard, to make Morgan education affordable as possible, many of you all have a lot of student loans. Amen. And I know that overcoming all of these challenges has instilled in you a soft heart for others and a backbone of steel. A steel backbone and a soft heart will beat a silver spoon any day. Graduates, these insights about the challenges and your character bring me back to the critical crossroads where we stand today. To that fork in the road for yourselves and your country. Your life experiences and your educational achievements are essential elements of our potential to lead our nation during a very difficult and challenging time. The fundamental question for each of us is this: what will you do with this potential? Will you draw upon the confidence in your competence that you have gained when you are confronted with future and by future obstacles? Have you learned not to mistake a comma in life for periods and carry on? Will you recognize the opportunities that are now open to you and fight against anyone who intentionally or otherwise stands in the way of your achieving your destiny? And most important of all to me and your country, will you utilize the obstacles that you have overcome as passports to helping others reach their own potential in life? Graduates, the answers to these questions, I submit to you, will define your future as citizens of what is still the most significant democracy and democratic republic in the history of the world. This is the challenge to which I will now turn. Ladies and gentlemen, a few moments ago I shared with you briefly, as a child, my family lived near Fort McHenry where the Star-Spangled Banner waves. And my reciting the flag to the flag and wondering what it meant anything for me. I also shared with you how I had been inspired by Juanita Jackson Mitchell, a lawyer. That experience taught me two important lessons. It taught me that I had rights that others had to respect, even if they didn't want to. And it taught me that we sometimes must struggle and even experience pain as we stand up for our constitutional rights. And to all of us who are blessed to be citizens of this United States, I must submit to you that the time to stand up and be counted is right now. No, don't wait. We got to stand up right now. Since the 2016 presidential election, the American people have marched, organized, and demanded serious reforms in their government. Then last year in 2018, the people elected a Democratic majority in the House of Representatives. We have been charged with more seriously and comprehensively addressing the challenges that are central to our daily lives. Americans from every ethnic and religious background have been crying out to Congress that will confront the widening disparities in our incomes. We're working to address the serious, unresolved challenges that confront us in public education, healthcare, law enforcement, and our environment. Yet, even as we continue our struggle for greater social justice, the overriding challenge that we now must confront and overcome is far more fundamental. Please consider this. At the close of our nation's Constitutional Convention in 1787, Benjamin Franklin was asked whether the framers had proposed a republic or a monarchy. Mr. Franklin is said to have replied, and I quote, "A republic if you can keep it." If you can keep it. Today in 2019, we still have a republic, if we can keep it. The functioning, indeed the very legitimacy of our democratic system has been under siege for some time. We must, there's no room for error. We must confront and overcome the continuing attacks on our elections from sources both foreign and domestic. We must address as well the failure of our administration, this administration, and some in Congress to adequately defend us against those attacks. This fight for the very soul of our democracy has been raised and inescapably by the actions of the President of the United States of America, both while in office and it may still be determined by his prior conduct. Now, I didn't come here to give a political speech. I came here to make it clear that we've got work to do. Equally dangerous, if not more so, the threats to our democracy have been allowed to metastasize by the failure of the current Republican majority in the Senate and the prior Republican House majority to fulfill our constitutional duties to investigate and cure the executive abuse and hold this administration accountable. For the unity and the future of our democratic republic, remember the one that we want to keep. The Congress must reassert our constitutional power and obligation of oversight. For the unity and future of our democratic republic, patriotic citizens of every political persuasion must support us in meeting this challenge. We must demand and obtain answers to serious questions that until now have gone unanswered. And most important of all, we must perform this constitutional duty so effectively, efficiently, and convincingly that those Americans who support this president and those who disagree will reach a shared and united answer as to how our nation must proceed. I share all of this with you, ladies and gentlemen, because our citizenship brings with it duties as well as rights. Our nation, like these graduates today, stand at a crossroads. There are those who, by their actions, prefer an unchecked executive rather than a president constrained by the constitutional powers of the Congress in Article 1 of the Constitution. There are those who, if allowed to do so, would move us toward a monarchy rather than the republic that we have been given. The republic checks and balances that our Constitution guarantees. This undemocratic tendency cannot be allowed to continue unchecked. And all of us, as citizens, must do our duty. I certainly did not come here to make this political speech, it turned out to be one. But what I do ask of each of you is to appreciate the value of our democratic republic in its hour of peril. What I do ask of each of you, and especially our graduates, is to call upon the talents and education that you have received at this great institution and stand up for our democracy in your own communities. What I do ask of you for yourselves is President Obama's challenge to all of us. I ask you to fight for the America that we want to become. For myself, I can only promise you this. I will continue to do all that I can to live up to the lasting example set for us by former Congresswoman Barbara Jordan when she declared in 1974, "My faith in the Constitution is whole. It is complete. It is total. And I'm not going to sit here and be an idle spectator to the diminution and subversion or the destruction of the Constitution." Ladies and gentlemen, as citizens of a still great republic, we must be clear. This is our time. And this is our challenge to meet and to overcome. Even as Americans were forced to rise up in the past, the threats to our democracy once again demand that we respond. Please consider what, as a nation, we have been experiencing. Once again, as in our past, our nation is struggling to overcome forces of societal conflict, official inhumanity, calculated distrust that far surpass anything that we have been forced to endure in the last 5 decades. Once again, there are those in national power who seek to dominate our nation by dividing us from our countrymen and women. I remind you that our diversity is not our problem. Our diversity is our promise. Once again, the American people must respond to false leaders whose governing strategy is grounded in the dictum, the war of all against all. Once again, hundreds of millions of Americans are going to sleep at night haunted by whatever appalling developments the morning may bring. I frankly indict these dangers to our democratic republic. Those of us who were raised up to adulthood and citizenship during the Dr. King era, we are not afraid. Am I right, class of 1969? We are not afraid. And above all, we are not defeated, nor graduates should you be. And I want you to understand that you have something that I don't have. If I could buy it from you, I'd buy it. I'd give everything up, my wife and kids. At 68, I've now lived longer than I will live. Your lives are in front of you. And so I beg you to go out and stand up for this democracy that allows us to have this great university, that allow us to be able to do the things that we're doing, that allow generation after generation of our people to rise up. As Dr. King often reminded us in my youth, our nation's darkest hours has often been just before the dawn. So it can be again as we stand together, march together, vote together, and demand the light of democracy be restored. As we have done so often in our past, we who are Americans of color must once again lead this march to defend our Constitution and the democratic republic it sustains. We who once were slaves, we who once were called 3/5 of a man, we who once were barred from citizenship, must now march in the forefront of a movement of democratic restoration for all Americans. We are at a crossroads, and we must once again assert the full measure of our citizenship. Throughout our history, justice has prevailed when there were those who had the courage to chart a better course. And as I close, a year ago, my mother passed away after preaching a sermon. She had a stroke. And Chairman and Philmate, she called all of her children around. And she had a message for all of us. And she sat there and she laid there, near half of her weight was gone. A woman who had created her own church and had been a wonderful wife and had been a wonderful mother for 7 children. But she laid there and she wanted to give me a last message. And I knew that she was going to say, "I love you, Elijah." I was waiting for it. I knew she was going to say, "I'm proud of you, Elijah." I was waiting for it. But she said neither. She kept pointing at a piece of paper by her bed. And I couldn't understand what she was saying because she had suffered a stroke. And I finally figured it out, Mr. President. She pointed out a ballot, the type that you take in the voting booth. And she kept pointing. And I gave it to her, and what she was saying is, do not let them take away our right to vote. Don't let them take away our right to vote. And so it is. I thank you, and to graduates, I congratulate you, and may God bless.